What was your creepy unexplained experience as a child? 1. Haven't told this one in a while. I was young, 5 to 7, somewhere in there. I was sleeping in between my parents for whatever reason. I woke up. I remember the clock reading around 4 a.m. There was something standing by the window, looking out into the front yard. It looked like a man in a brown wool robe, about 6 feet 4 inches or so. I started to stir and sat up in bed, and the thing turned and looked at me. Dear God, that face. Ashen white skin, lots of really pronounced wrinkles, and the face drooped like it was melting, down into a really pointy chin, almost similar to a scream mask but with all of the features of a living being. Its mouth was hanging open and its eyes were wide, almost like it was worried or frightening. It kept its gaze on me while it moved away from the window, in front of the bed, and out the open bedroom door. The second it exited the room, the lights turned on their own and both of my parents jumped up on either side of me, breathing heavily like they'd both just woken up from a nightmare. To be clear, I was entirely able to move during this. I don't think it was sleep paralysis, but I'm not sure what it could have been other than some demon or really freaking ugly ghost. I've never seen it since, but I can still picture it clearly as a day. 2. I was out at our cabin in the remote mountainous wilderness of Colorado with my dad and had to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. This necessitated a flashlight and shoes because the outhouse was far away. There was no one but me and my dad for miles in any direction. So I thought. I suddenly heard voices in the distance and stopped in my tracks. It seemed to be coming from my right, deep in the woods in the middle of nowhere, a quarter of a mile from the road. Being 11 and unafraid of the world, I foolishly yelled, "Who's out there?" There was silence for a few seconds, then a shouted string of profanity so vulgar it terrified my virgin ears. I stood stock still for a moment like a terrified rabbit but heard nothing else, so I ran back to the house and woke my dad up. He got up, loaded his gun, and turned all the lights on, but we never heard another sound. To this day, we have not seen or heard from another person within 15 miles of the cabin. 3. My mom put me to bed in my room but I woke up downstairs. I thought it was a dream but some man picked me up when I was almost asleep, carried me downstairs, and put me down on some blankets between a sofa and a chair. I was quite young so my parents still had a safety gate. My dad wasn't in work nights then, and my mom was asleep so no one knows how I managed to get downstairs. I can still remember this now, strangely. 4. When I was a child, my grandparents' house always creeped me out. I was terrified of the basement, and there was something off about the rest of the house. Once when I was 10, my mom and I were sleeping in my grandpa's bed. I couldn't sleep and I was facing the middle of the bed so the back of my head was near the space between the bed and the wall window. All of a sudden, I feel something poke the back of my head twice. I was petrified and froze so I never turned my head to see what was poking me. To this day I don't know what could have happened but I can still feel those pokes. 5. Someone left a voicemail on my home phone saying, "Bad things happen," my mother's first name, but it's okay. That was the whole message. This was right around the time of my parents' divorce and scared the crap out of my siblings and me. I'm guessing it was a friend of my mom calling to comfort her and just doing it awkwardly. Scary crap to a 6-year-old. 6. I was young, maybe 8. Just so you know, I always go to sleep in my bed and I'd never, ever fall asleep on the couch. My grandpa died and we got back from his funeral. That night I went to bed, in my room as usual, but I woke up in the middle of the night on the living room couch. When I looked up, I saw my grandpa's ghost. It wasn't scary or anything, at the time it felt natural. He didn't say anything but there was this understanding between us. I went back to my room and went back to sleep. I would have assumed it was a dream but it was so vivid and real that it stuck with me for years, especially since I woke up on the couch, which made the moment stick out even more in my mind. It wasn't even an "I saw a ghost" moment. It was just a weird vivid memory that seemed so normal at the time that I didn't think anything strange of it. When I was about 20 I told my mom that story and she said, "Was it the day of his funeral? Because I saw his ghost that night too." That freaked my crap up. 7. It was latish at night and I heard a car crash outside my house. For some reason, I had a gut feeling about who it was and told my parents, and I was right. It was a friend of the family that I had only met once years and years ago and did not even live close to us. I have no idea if it was something more than just the hugest coincidence guess in the world. 8. From 5 to 6 years old, would see a shadow figure, perfect human woman shape, walk the walls in the night, back and forth. It really creeped me out that I would just put the covers over my head. I was an only child and my parents were in their bedroom. It was when I was still wide awake way before I got sleepy. So creepy. 9. When I was about 4 I used to randomly get up at about 3 a.m. every night, walk all the way into an living room, and stare into a huge mirror we had up in there. I have had an irrational fear of the dark for as long as I can remember, so thinking back on when I used to do this, without hesitation, and standing there for a few minutes staring at myself, I can't help but wonder so many things. 10. About 6 years old at the time and we were at an old cemetery where my mom was trying to find an old grave of a relative. She couldn't remember where the gravestone was and was standing still looking around. While she was standing there, I suddenly felt compelled to run off in a certain direction. I kept running among the headstones until the feeling to stop came over me. I came to a stop in front of a headstone and looked at it to find that it was the headstone of the person my mom was looking for. 11. When I was really little, maybe 3 or 4, I used to swear I would see Jesus's image light up on the wall next to my bed and it would talk to me. This happened several times, and horrified me each time, until one night I asked God to stop it from happening because it was scaring me. Never came back. 12. When I was around 5 or 6 I told my mom an old lady used to come and read me stories when I was in bed every night. According to our next-door neighbor, the lady I had described died a few years before we moved into the house 13. I was laying on my bedroom floor, just sleepover things, and looking out my open door into the hallway. There aren't any windows in the hall or in nearby rooms that could cast a shadow out into that part of the hallway, but I saw the shadow of someone walking into the bathroom. I figured it was my cousin, but then they came up the stairs, down the hall, and into my room. I totally flipped out and we couldn't figure out where the shadow came from. 14. I grew up on the central coast of California, and my family would frequently visit Big Sur for camping, hiking, or just hanging out and having lunch at one of the restaurants. I must have been about 7. Old enough to visit the bathroom independently, but still rather new to the freedom of walking around somewhere that wasn't my neighborhood or the woods alone. I went into the bathroom at a restaurant called the River Inn, and there were 3 stalls, 1 handicapped, and 2 regular. All but one of the stalls, a regular one, were taken. I distinctly remember looking under the doors for feet, because I was a little kid, and for whatever reason preferred the handicapped stall. I saw no feet, but the doors were locked. Whatever. I went into the one open stall. There was a huge freaking squid in the toilet. Like, the body had to be at least a foot long, plus tentacles, coiled around the inside of the toilet bowl. It totally filled the available space. Cloudy dead squid eyes, gazing up at me from the pooper. I ran out of the bathroom in horror, told nobody, and held my pee for the 45-minute drive home. What the freak was that squid doing there? All I can surmise is it was a line cook prank, in an area that ubiquitously has squid on the menu. 25 years later, that terror toilet squid still haunts me. 15. When I was about 5 years old, I fell asleep on my mother's lap during a long bus ride and, from my perception, woke up at our destination in what seemed to me like the blink of an eye, which in reality was a bit over 8 hours. I literally did not perceive any length of time passing between laying my head down and getting up. Probably the closest I'll ever come to knowing what time travel feels like. 16. So a friend of my family is very wealthy, and has a big house that we all affectionately call the castle. Now it's no mansion, but for my low state of living it seemed like it. Somewhere between 6 to 8 rooms, a pool, 2 living rooms, a giant basement filled with a flat screen and pool tables, and all that. My friend and I would always crash in the basement when we stayed over. Now it was close to Halloween time, so we just finished watching a scary movie and were called upstairs for dinner. I had just finished taking a particularly nasty dump, so I closed the bathroom door and ate like usual. When we came back down to the basement, the bathroom door was open. Because it was so close to Halloween we got all spooked and ran upstairs telling my mom. We closed the door, and it's open. So spooky, I know. But her response was, "Oh, that's just Beacom." And told us his story. Beacom is the house owner's brother's imaginary friend from when they were kids. They made sure to emphasize that it was friendly, but whenever something moves, or doors opened or closed, they just blame Beacom and laugh it off. So my friend and I went back downstairs terrified, and for the rest of the night we kept watch on the doors to see if anything was different, but sure enough, if ever we both left the basement, when we came back one of the 3 downstairs doors was opened. We got into the habit of closing them all. My mom tried to scare us once with a wolf mask, which was funnier than anything. But anyway, as we go to sleep there are 2 half windows, I say half because they are small and lead outside, while we are underground, if that makes sense, and 2 couches. I lay on one and my friend lays on the other one, and from the way we're laying we could each see one of the windows. And on my window is a white face. It's very dark and hard to see, but it looks like 3 black holes on a white field that might just happen to make a face. But when I get up to look closer it moves away, almost like it's more of a reflection of light than anything else. I deliberately didn't tell my friend about it because we had had enough fear for one day. So 2 years or so later we are all talking about the scariest things that had ever happened to us, and of course, Beacom gets brought into the situation. I'm listening to my friend tell the story and he ends with, "Yeah, that night scared the crap out of me. I never told you this, but when we were sleeping I saw this super creepy white face looking at me through the window. But we could only see different windows. I lost my crap and was never more creeped out. It's been some time since we've been to the castle, but that story will always spook me." 17, was about 5 or 6. One night my parents and I were watching TV in the living room of our ranch-style house in the suburbs of the Midwest. A stanger light coming from the hallway got our attention. In the bedroom at the end of the hall, there was a 1 by 1 foot glowing orb of light floating about 3 to 4 feet from the floor, illuminating the dark room. The orb seemed to realize it was being observed and moved very quickly, and before we knew it the orb was outside like it had passed through the wall or windows. It then very quickly went around the house, jumping or passing through 2 6-foot fences in a matter of seconds. We saw it do this through the windows and our dog started freaking out. My dad freaks out and grabs his revolver and a flashlight and storms outside. It had rained recently and there was mud outside, but no evidence of footprints or anything to rationally explain it. While the event is a family legend and now my mom thought it was a ghost or spirit, my dad thought it was aliens, and quite frankly I have no idea. I lean towards ball lightning, but it seemed to have at least some level of intelligence and seemed to make deliberate, not random movements. 18, in my bedroom growing up, there was a patch on the wall that would softly glow in the dark. It was so faint that it would disappear when I looked directly at it or got too close. It looked like there was a break in the curtains, but after I stood in front of it, I ruled this to be impossible. There were some nights it didn't glow at all. 19. The house I grew up in during a large portion of my childhood was built sometime in the 1930s. It was pretty big, which was great for a kid like me who loved to explore. Problem was that all throughout the house I would routinely get this creepy vibe, like as if someone were watching me, or this overwhelming feeling that I wasn't safe and needed to leave particular areas. Now, it could have just been an overactive imagination. Kids are definitely prone to having those. The problem was I wasn't exposed to scary movies or stories as a kid. I think my parents recognized how scared I would get by my own imagination, and couldn't even fathom how bad it would be to actually see or hear something. Still, even as an adult now looking back, there are 2 particular events that I can't possibly explain as being irrational. Both of them involve the basement, which I'll mention was primarily unfinished. To give a quick layout of it, the basement was accessible through the kitchen or the main hallway and was adjacent to the side door. It was unfinished, with hard concrete floors, and an area in the back that was mostly dirt. Going down the basement meant you had to take these wooden steps which had probably been there since the 30s. The first incident was on a weekend. My dad and I were sitting in the living room watching NASCAR, and during a commercial break he asked me to get him a beer. Unfortunately for me, he kept his beer down in the basement in this little mini fridge, and I was already kind of scared of going down there. Not wanting to upset him by telling him no, I went for it anyway. Before I even made it to the steps I was already getting that feeling that I shouldn't go any further, and that I should immediately turn right around, but I kept going on. As I got to the basement steps that fear continued to grow and grow. You know that feeling you get when you can just tell that someone is staring at you? Like a fifth sense, your spine gets kind of tingly and you have this overwhelming feeling to look in that direction. That's what I was experiencing tenfold. When I finally reached the bottom of the steps, I was almost completely paralyzed with fear. I slowly turned my head to the left towards where the open dirt area was and said, "Hello?" As soon as I said that, two red glowing orb things emerged from that dark part. I'd say they were eyes, but I can't be for sure. I didn't study them long enough before I ran up the steps as fast as I could. My dad must have heard my running and met me in the hallway, and asked what was going on. I told him about what I saw, and he immediately headed down there. I think he might have thought it was an animal or something, but after a few minutes, he emerged with a beer in hand and told me it was nothing. The second event took place a year, maybe a year and a half later. It was during the summer, and my family and I were outside, Dad, Mom, younger brother, and myself. I had to use the bathroom and headed inside using the front door, as I had refused to use the side door since that previous event. When I went to go back outside though, I had thought I'd try and be brave, and face my fear. I headed towards the side door, sat at the top of the basement steps, and waited. It didn't take long for me to get those same feelings all over again. I shouldn't be there, something was watching me, and I needed to leave immediately. I was truly tired of the fear though. I wanted to be brave and face whatever threat was down there, so I stayed. It didn't take long for me to run though, because as soon as I had made that determination I saw a shadow painted across the wall opposite of the handrail. It was human, looked male, and seemed extremely large. No real fine details, again not enough time, as I immediately bolted out the door. I told my dad about it, and this time he seemed a bit more concerned. I didn't follow him into the house, but I did hear him racking his gun before he descended down. Just like last time though, he emerged, nothing to be found. There were other events, but those were the two primary ones. I still have nightmares about that place too. They are always so odd too. Before they involved me being inside the house already and going down to the basement to face whatever was down there. That's ended though, and now I'm always outside the house. The weather is odd, like it's not sure if it wants to be night or daytime. I have this feeling that I need to go into the house and explore it further. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. 20. To this day, I don't know if they were a series of freaked up dreams or if it was reality. But, when I was around 6 to 7, my family and I lived in a 2-story house with all the bedrooms upstairs. My mum would always send me to her room to collect nappies. My brother had just been born, and of course, my parents' room was at the very end of the hallway. I remember I had this distinct feeling that I could never recall. I just knew it when I felt it. The feeling was a warning sign that it was coming. Don't ask what the freak it was, because I had no clue. When it was coming, would get comfortable, lie on a bed or sit down, and close my eyes. I had to close my eyes though, under no circumstances were they to be open. I felt like it was forbidden to look at it. It was like a set of rules that I had to follow or else something would happen. I was too scared to question it. It would slowly come in, the feeling would grow as it got closer, and it would come from the hallway through the door. I felt like it was floating because I could never hear footsteps. It would literally just talk to me, like that's it. The subject would range from small talk to something extremely creepy, my mother's death. It would usually ask me questions like, "How was your day?" but I would never answer because, again, I was scared to death. At this point, I would wait and listen until I couldn't feel its presence anymore. Only then would it be safe to open my eyes and move. It was weird because I seemed to forget the experience until the next one. After it left, I would just continue on with what I was doing as if nothing had happened. The only time I'd actually acknowledge it was when the feeling would wash over me and I'd realize that I freaked up by being alone. I really don't remember much. That one nappy experience always stood out though. Everything would kind of blur together. Pretty much all my memories from then are like that. I only remember my thoughts and feelings at that time. I don't even know. 21. I was 8 years old and my cousin was turning 8 the next month. This occurred in early August. To add some context to this event, my family owns the land. A few of my uncles built their houses on their property, including my dad. My dad's house and my uncle's house are about 130 meters apart, and in the evening the farm lights light up the dirt path between their houses. The event, I remember this evening so clearly. It was a warm evening, the sun had just set, and the evening was calm, with no wind or inclement weather. My cousin and I are walking back to my dad's house. we're talking, and as we come about 50 meters close to my dad's house, this blinding white light flashed twice, and we both just stood there. We were both silent, standing there. We both looked at each other and said, "Did that just happen?" We both freaked out and ran the rest of the 50 meters back to my house. We, both very excited by this event, told my parents and his dad what happened outside, but nobody witnessed this, as the curtains were closed inside. None of the adults believed us. They said nothing, just kind of acknowledged us and continued visiting. The light wasn't accompanied by thunder because it wasn't lightning. The light was blinding. The acreage is located in the prairies. I don't know if there is any logical explanation for this event, but ever since then, I have always believed that maybe, just maybe, it was aliens or some astronomical event. I know this sounds absolutely ridiculous to some people, but my cousin and I don't try to convince other people of what we experienced, because we both know what we experienced. 22. I was about 7 and my brother was 13 and we still shared a room. I was always afraid of the dark when I was a kid. Periodically I would wake up in the night and call for Mom to come and turn on the hall light to be used as a night light. Much to the enjoyment of my brother. One night in the middle of winter I woke up, and right before I called out for Mom I noticed there was a man on the deck that was on the other side of the wall from our bedroom. I froze. I was totally freaked and tried to scream, but I could only make this high-pitched squeaking sound. The only thing I could do was cry. After what seemed like hours my dad heard me and came in to see what was wrong. The man was gone, of course, when I told him, and he blew it off as a nightmare until my brother, from under his covers, said that he saw it too. With that, my dad went outside with the shotgun. There were footprints in the snow outside our window and the window of my parents' bedroom. That one took a while to recover from. 23. I grew up in rural Scotland in the 80s and 90s. Think 50 kids total in my entire primary school, rural. There were only 4 kids in my year, one being me, so only 3 classmates. I was told that before we moved into the house I grew up in, the previous owner died of old age in our living room and they lived in my bedroom before that. There was some kind of raised wooden floor built for them to die on with a bed that was taken out when we got there. 2 spooky for me events as follows. I don't remember this, but my mum claims she couldn't find me when I was a toddler and later found me in a closed drawer in my room. No idea how I got in there and no idea how it was closed. I have a distant memory of seeing a dog-like ghost running in place in broad daylight in our living room. Mom had me hide behind the couch with her suddenly because the coal man was here to collect the money we owed him. We were extremely poor and had a coal fire to keep us warm in winter, but I didn't know why we were hiding at first. I peeked into the living room from behind the couch and saw what was like a standing shadow, but it was made of light running on the spot in front of the fireplace. It was like a dog running really quickly, but it was running in place and suddenly switching side to side every few seconds like it was glitching out. I thought that was why Mom had made me hide behind the couch. I got scared and went and stopped looking into the living room, hiding behind the couch fully again. It stuck with me as a WTF was that I saw moment, but seeing as I was barely primary school age back then I can't really give it any real weight as paranormal evidence to myself. My room had a lot of things fall over in it that shouldn't have, and never with anyone there to do it. Every now and then we'd hear a loud bang come from my upstairs room while we were all downstairs and something had fallen over. Usually, small things like books, games, etc., but I had a mirror smash from falling on the floor. The worst was my entire wardrobe fell over and broke my bed. The wardrobe was really big and heavy and shouldn't have been able to fall forward on its own like that. Scared the crap out of us all from the boom alone. Thought we had a robber up there. A few family members told me they thought I was in my room and were surprised to see I wasn't because they saw my door in the later stage of closing as they went by, as though someone had gone in there and had been closing the door behind them, and a family member saw the last seconds of the door moving to a close. I never witnessed this, but it was unsettling to hear about. I remember that when we kids were left in the house alone, which happened fairly often, we'd hear very audible footsteps and banging coming from the rooms upstairs, but it usually came from my bedroom. I had sleep paralysis a lot when I lived there. I'd scream really loud and freak everyone out. Typical sleep paralysis episodes. I think I'm awake but I can't move and it's like something evil is in the room with me with the intent to kill me and I have to fight it off or I'll die type feeling. If you've never had one, feel lucky, they freaking suck. If I went into detail about what I saw and felt during sleep paralysis, this post would be a lot bigger, so I don't want to. Every now and then a really, really loud bang would wake me up. As though someone had rapped their knuckles on something wooden near my head with a lot of force. This has followed me everywhere since but doesn't happen as often. I think it's exploding head syndrome, but it's still not a nice way to wake up. Bonus 3 Spooky 5 Me, my stepdad and mom both had the same dream that they were abducted by a UFO. My stepdad was telling my mom about this crazy dream he had that a UFO came and the roof went see-through and he was taken aboard. Mom went pale and said she had the same dream. My younger sisters shared a room and were both freaked out and said that they'd woken up to their blankets on the floor and thought it was ghosts. I didn't have a UFO dream or wake up with my blankets off of me, so haha, I guess my haunted bedroom saved me there. Super bonus story, when I was a young teen I was at this tiny river beach with a good friend of mine late at night, drinking by a little campfire we made because it's Scotland and that's what we do. We were waiting on another friend to come. We were having a laugh talking about crap when we hear these very heavy footsteps come towards us. Cool, we thought, it's the friend we're waiting on, but he never appears. We think he's freaking out, so we call out his name but no answer. We get up and wander out into the darkness and can't see anyone. Literally, seconds have passed, no way in hell anyone was right there and then left in that time without us hearing or seeing them. We still think our friend is freaking with us and we decide that he must be hiding a bit further down the trail to get to the river. We actually walked all the way back to the start of the trail, a good quarter-mile back from the river where we meet our friend, now only just arriving on his push bike with no clue what we were on about when we tell him that was a good joke. I'd swear blind someone was right next to us, we both heard it. Doesn't help that the section of the river we were drinking on has stupid Scottish folk legends about a stupid ghost who haunts it because they drowned. I don't believe the ghost story but do personally know of people who have actually drowned in the river. I left home a long time ago now and things like that don't happen anymore except for still having sleep paralysis episodes and a loud bang waking me up from time to time, but by far less than when I lived at home. Surprisingly, I'm actually fairly skeptical about the paranormal. It does interest me, but I think that most things can be explained rationally. 24. When I was 7, my dad bought a pocket watch that came with its own stand. He put it on top of our TV since we didn't have any other clock in the house beside the bedroom just yet, we had just moved in 2 weeks earlier. Me being me, I got up in the middle of the night when everyone was asleep to get a quick late-night snack. I sneak halfway across the living room when I noticed that the pocket watch's tick was getting louder and louder. I stopped to inspect it, didn't seem to be that bad, I ignored it, got my snack, and started heading back. Again, I heard the tick of the pocket watch getting louder and louder. I stopped again, then heard the following sung in a song: Mr. Frost is a bad man, Mr. Frost is a snitch. Mr. Frost is a bad man, beat us within an inch. I bolt to my room, hide under the covers, and refuse to come out. Ever since then, I've hated that pocket watch. I've tried many times to search for someone named Mr. Frost in my area and nothing has come up. 25. When I was little, I would have dreams that came true. I'd dream of someone coming for dinner and then there would be a surprise guest the next day. Stuff like that. Then when I was about 5 or 6 it started to get dark. I was dreaming about cousins in car crashes or a friend's older sister cutting herself, and it all happened within a week or 2. It started to freak me out, so decided to tell my parents. At first, they tried to calm me down, but then they started noticing it and getting freaked out, which only scared me even more. And then one day I stopped dreaming. I haven't had a dream, prophetic or otherwise, since, and honestly it kind of scares me to think about it. 26. I was like 9 years old. I was sleeping in my parents' bed. At that point, I think it was a Saturday morning and my dad had gone bike riding with his friends really early. I woke up and got in bed with my mom. I was having a bad dream and I woke up and looked around and went to go pee. When I got back into the bed there was a white pale hand waving at me from behind the closet. I thought I was dreaming, but I was so shocked I couldn't do anything. I kind of put it in the back of my mind until a year later my older cousin said she had seen a hand waving at her behind her mirror when I was at her house. It made me realize I really experienced that and didn't imagine it. 27. The night before a beloved relative died, I had an urge I couldn't shake to sit down and talk to them and hug them tightly, but I couldn't explain why. Sometime around the time the sun was coming up, I thought I woke up, looked towards the door to my room, and that person was standing there. They said not to worry, don't cry, and then left. I found out that night that my favorite person had passed away not long before I saw them in my room. 28. I was about 8 or 9 when this happened. My family had a boat that we trailered back and forth from Lake Hapatcong in NJ. We were coming in from a day on the lake and it was already dark. I was obsessed with fishing at that age and the dock was a great spot to fish, so as my family was getting the boat hitched to the trailer I decided to throw some casts out. I noticed some activity in the water about 30 yards from where I was standing, which was about 60 feet from the boat ramp my family was hitching the boat. I threw my line towards what I thought was fish feeding, jumping, and whatever was causing the activity turned towards where I was and started swimming towards me with a kind of serpentine motion. It was too dark to make out any distinctive features except a large head. I noped the freak out, dropped my fishing pole and ran. No one believed me at the time, but 20 years later and my story hasn't changed and I still wonder WTF that thing was. 29. About time I get to talk about this again. My family lives in a super rural part of East Tennessee, and we have a family homestead that's been passed down for generations called the Turley House. Legend in the family has it that it was a Civil War hospital, which I can totally see because it's absolutely ancient and creepy. We also have a legend in the family that we're all haunted by a demon spirit, God knows what, called Wool Eyes. He's so prominent in our family's history that he's just a fact of life at this point, so it's not unusual to hear somebody say something like, "Oh look, Wool Eyes is at it again. He must be upset." One of the creepy experiences I had growing up here is the never-ending rosebush. There were 2 rose bushes on the corner of the house that wasn't very big. I have some distinct memories of playing around them and getting absolutely batcrap lost in the rose bushes, running in circles for hours and hours at a time. It was sort of like that scene in Spirited Away when Chihiro and Haku are running through the flower hedges. Eventually, I would find my way out, but it would be hours later and my mom would be hella angry that I was gone for so long. I never really thought much of it because of kid logic, but I asked my mom about it years later and she said that all the kids in the family have stories about getting lost in the same spot. Everybody always blamed it on Wool Eyes, saying he was just having fun messing around. Wish I could go back and explore the house some. It's got some crazy stories through the years. 30. As a kid, we played in the basement a lot. The floor was open and cement so we could roller skate around. Also, the walls were either dirt or brick so we were allowed to shoot BB guns at targets. Basically, I wasn't scared of the basement at all as a kid. One day my sister was in a side room that had jars of peaches and pickles. The dirt cellar type room stayed cold even in the summer. She wouldn't let me in and I was sure she was eating peaches. I could see her feet under the crack of the door and I stuck my fingers under and she messed around with my fingers and giggled. I felt that her fingers were wet and I said, "Don't eat all the peaches, I want some." Then she pushed down on my fingers so hard and it hurt and she was grunting and basically freaking out. I started screaming and tugging. Finally, I pulled my hands back and she was quiet. She then kicked the door really hard. I ran upstairs to tell on her and there she was with my mom in the kitchen. It was pretty freaky. No one believed me. In fact, my mom just said my imagination had gotten away from me and to forget about it.